The Black Panther Party built a national movement through a newspaper. Every week, they printed about their political vision, repression they were facing, and the key demands that they were making. That weekly publication helped turn a local Oakland-based organization into a national movement. I'm Dr. Joshua Crutchfield, historian of Black freedom movements. This is Sankofa House, where we look back at history in order to move forward. In our last class, we examined how the Panthers built their survival programs to really make their politics concrete. Today, we're asking a different question. How did the Panthers communicate all of this? How did they shape how the movement understood itself? To understand this, we have to see the newspaper as central to the Black Panthers' organizing and their media strategy. It aligned chapters, circulated political education, helped frame events to their community members, and projected the party's voice nationally. We can think of the newspaper as a strategy in print. Scholar Jane Rhodes, in her book Framing the Panthers, puts it this way: communication, the process of representing shared beliefs and rituals and disseminating them to an audience, took up a significant portion of the Black Panthers' labors. So from the beginning, the Panthers understood the power of the media. Television cameras had captured the images of the berets, the rifles, and the Panthers' confrontations with police. And those images traveled fast. They created fascination. They created fear. They created headlines. But they did not explain the Panthers' 10-point program. They did not explain the party's political theory. They did not explain what serve the people meant. P.P. Newton later argued that armed self-defense dominated the public perception while their political program was de-emphasized. So the Panthers built a political organ that was under their control. The newspaper became a central site of that labor. And if you misunderstand the newspaper, then you partially miss how the Panthers really grew. And if you value this type of historically grounded analysis of Black political movements, then make sure you subscribe to Sankofa House. So what did all of this look like in practice? The catalyst for the first issue was the police killing of Denzel Dowell in April of 1967. Officials had ruled it a justified homicide. Community members disagreed. The Dowell family asked the newly formed Panthers then to investigate. The Panthers organized a rally. They recited the 10-point program. Then they published. On April 25th, 1967, they released a 4-page mimeograph paper titled, "Why Was Denzel Dowell Killed?" The layout on this first paper was rough, but the political message was precise. The paper framed Dowell's death as a part of a broader pattern of police violence in the community, and it advocated for organized community self-defense. So from the beginning, the paper functioned as documentation and mobilization at the same time. Over time, the paper helped build what the Panthers would later call a revolutionary culture. The paper circulated the 10-point program, reports on police violence, international solidarity, party rules and discipline, and the party's revolutionary analysis. It taught readers how to interpret the state, how to understand capitalism, how to locate themselves within a global anti-imperialist struggle. It was political education in print. Two people shaped the paper's voice and look. Eldridge Cleaver, the Ministry of Information, sharpened the paper's rhetorical edge. Emory Douglas, Minister of Culture, shaped its visual language. The pig cartoons, the armed Black figures, the Black fist. Douglas would call this revolutionary art, a tool for liberation. The newspaper also provided consistent funding. Each copy sold for 25 cents. Chapters were assigned sell quotas. Members sold it weekly on street corners. Non-members, including neighborhood children, were often recruited to help distribute it. By 1968, Bobby Seale claimed that circulation had reached 125,000 copies sold per week. By 1970, government estimates placed it at about 140,000 copies a week. Those cells supported legal defense, chapter offices, printing costs, and the organization's infrastructure. Here's the tension. And we've been discussing this a lot. The more visible the party became, the more repression intensified. The more the paper circulated nationally, the more federal attention it drew. The Panthers were fighting to control their narrative, all while experiencing intense state repression. And that struggle over representation not only shaped how the state would eventually respond to the Panthers, it shaped who participated in shaping the party and its newspaper. It required editors, writers, typists, layout work, distribution networks. Much of that labor was carried by Black women inside the party. And that fact should complicate how we understand the organization. The Black Panther newspaper was the party's classroom, archive, organizing tool, and funding mechanism. Printed every week. It stitched together ideas and imagery. In our last class, we examined how the Panthers built material power through their survival programs. In this class, we've examined how they built a narrative power through print. In our next class, we're going to look more carefully at the Black women who really sustained this infrastructure, politically, intellectually, and organizationally. Here's the question that I want you to sit with. What is the importance of movements for freedom and controlling our own media? How does that help shape our political imaginations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for studying with me.